Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. One of the things that the pandemic did is it helped us realize that organizations must make a profit to survive. And to maximize that profit, they first have to optimize their culture. And that's what this podcast is dedicated to. Today, we're going to have Ken Keller join us. And I'm thrilled to have Ken. I've known him, must be close to 20 years now. And he's the CEO of Strategic Advisory Boards. And he's been doing that for 27 years. And I've had the chance to watch him work. And he helps CEOs, owners, leaders, and every member of the organization. And he does it in such a caring and humble way. So I'm thrilled to have him here with us. Ken, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Well, I'm going to ask you in a second to share a little bit about your background, because I know in addition to the strategic advisory boards, you know, you've had a career with some of the really big famous brands in the world. And I'm sure that probably had something to do with how you got here or why you got here. So if you just kind of kick us off and share your background and particularly help us understand how you got to doing what you do, because I've seen a lot of people lead various groups of leaders, and I think you have a unique and extremely positive style. So help us understand how you got here.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it again, and I'm delighted to be here. So I'm a native of the San Francisco Bay Area. My folks moved out from Detroit after World War II. And we all 8 of us in my family went to the same high school, interestingly enough. We all had the same teachers, interestingly enough. And a couple of us got involved in student government. I was actually senior class president of my high school class. I put myself through school in 4 years. I got a degree in political science. My goal was to get a job working in local government, but that kind of went by the wayside with the Proposition 13, which rolled back property taxes. So I found myself scrambling to get a job, and I realized with a degree in political science, I knew very little about business. So I made up my mind at that point I was going to have to get an MBA, which I ended up doing. But I ended up landing a job through my network, friend of the family, at a 100-year-old family-owned business called Hills Brothers Coffee, which was based in San Francisco. And they're still on all the supermarket shelves around the country. And I got a job in a startup division of that company called Private Label. And so if you ever see a store brand coffee, whether it's ground coffee or instant coffee or whatnot, chances are at one point or another, Hills Brothers packed that coffee and sold that label. So what that did was it made me the jack of all trades, because I had to deal with every single department in the company. And of course, this was all foreign. This was all foreign to people who'd been running the same brand, the same can through the lines. And so now we have to stop and start and put my label in and so forth and so on. So, but we worked out the grand truce, and we figured out a way that we could provide very high service levels and still get the production that we needed for the Hills brand. So I was in the private label operations division for a while. Then they moved me into finance. They said, nobody understands private label but you. So you're working on your MBA, and we're going to put you in finance. So I became a financial analyst. And I did such a good job with that. They said, now we're going to move you into the sales and marketing department, because nobody in sales and marketing really understands the numbers. And so I was, again, jack of all trades, master of none. I ended up moving to Houston after Hills Brothers got sold to Nestle. And I was there for a couple of years. And I came back to California, this time to LA, where I went to work for the people that manufacture a little pink packet of sweetener called Sweet and Low.
Oh, yeah.
I was the brand manager on the Sweet and Low in the food service division. And after 4 years, I decided to do consulting work on my own. Initially in the food business, and then later on, I broadened my base of clients to do most industries. So how did I get to what I was doing? I realized I was giving the same advice over and over and over again. And I thought there must be a better way. There must be a more efficient way. And so what I did was I said, let's get all these people around the table in one room at one time in one place, and I will share my message. And that became the concept of strategic advisory boards, which is the peer groups that I'm now running and have been running for these many years. So what I bring to and how I do it a little bit differently is my background of operations, marketing and sales and finance is unique. Many people who work in other organizations that do similar things only grew up in one area, one function, and I have the broad net. So, I've never worked in human resources. I've never worked in IT. I've never worked in quality control or compliance, but I have enough of an understanding to steer my clients where they need help in those areas. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. Now, what's changed over time? Probably the biggest change is the CEOs have less time to spend on improving themselves than ever before. They're just so swamped with the day-to-day tactical, getting things done, getting things out the door, getting the customer taken care of. They really think that they can put off learning and growing and getting better so that their organizations can get better. And because of that, it's been more and more difficult for me to say to people, when you come to be in one of my groups, one of my strategic advisory boards, this isn't something other than work. This is work. This is you working on yourself so you become a better leader, so you can have better people, better results, better culture, happier clients. So that, and then of course the pandemic, we started meeting on Zoom and all that kind of stuff. But the heart and soul of this is persuading the very busy, the overworked, the stressed out CEO, hey, there's a place for you to come. I'll call it a lifeboat, call it a round table, whatever you want to call it, where you can come and let loose and get help.
Wow. And I've had the chance to watch you work in those groups. And, what in our work, one of the things we've learned is that for an organization to survive, they have to create profitable revenue. And often groups, CEOs, that's all they think about. When they started the company, they had a purpose, right. And the purpose could have been great engineering, or it could have been to make a difference in schools, or it could have been medical related. But somehow payroll and, paying back the bank and some of those other things get in the way. And the pandemic forced us to step back and recognize that those things that CEOs want to do, which are, how do I scale? How do I become sustainable? How do I innovate? When you take that step back, you realize their teams do all that. That's what the teams are about. And the CEO's job is, how do I lead them there? So, that's why I'm so glad you're here today. Because one of the things you didn't talk about, but when I watch you work, I see great empathy. I see great patience. I see questioning and helping people evolve. Talk a little bit about how you approach those things, because you are so you're so kind about how you do that it just seems like people gravitate to you.
Well, Rick, thank you. I kind of look at it as advice versus opinion. And it's very simply, if you want my opinion, I will give it to you in a diplomatic fashion, but it can in fact be quite candid. Now, what is the opinion? The opinion is my opinion. The opinion is, if I was in your shoes right now, here's what I would do. However, I realize that most of my clients aren't interested in my opinion, although they may ask, you know, what's your opinion? What do you think about this? And if that's the case, I will answer them. But they're really more interested in advice. And the advice piece is simply, here's what I would do if I could just give you a little bit of advice so that you will act on it. In other words, no big sudden changes. Hey, you need to do this one thing. And so even then, of course, because they're busy, they have to process, they have to think it through. I've already kind of thought it through. I mean, I kind of look ahead for the landmines, the roadblocks, the obstacles, the walls. And so I kind of spoon feed them the advice so that they will turn and go down a path that I think will get them to where they need to go. Now, I'll give you a good example. I recognize that one of my clients needed a change in leadership, at the leadership for one of the departments. And I was leery that you know, you're flying and the voice commands, pull up, pull up, pull up. And I was worried that this guy didn't hear that. So I said, look, I'm hearing pull up, pull up, pull up. And he kind of looked at me kind of funny. I said, you know, I'm not saying you need to make a change right this second, but it would be good if you did. And here's what I would recommend you do when you decide to make the change. Now, it took him 10 months to reach the same conclusion that I had reached. And now he's finally acting on it. Did the plane crash? No, it scraped some mountaintops, and the almost had a gas light flashed a few times. An engine failed, but the plane still kept flying. But that's why I do it, because I know it's hard for these folks to make tough decisions. They may, in the privacy of a one-on-one, they may in fact say, well, you know, I need to fire this guy, I need to let this guy go, she needs to be demoted, blah, 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 blah. They may say these things. Pulling the trigger is totally different, and I get that. And there are repercussions when they do that. So I try to spoon feed them. Hansel and Gretel and the right through the forest. That's kind of how I try to work it, because I know that all of these people feel an empathy to the people that work for them. And it's not, it could be not even a family business, it could be a publicly traded company, but they all feel some level of obligation to people, to give them every opportunity, to give them a chance to turn things around. And so they want to be fair about it and so forth. So I've kind of been there. I mean, I've been fired a couple times in my career. It's not pleasant, but I understand that, and I appreciate the way that it was handled. And so I have that empathy, because I know that it's hard for these owners, these CEOs, to make these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and that leads to a question about culture. You know, people today, in this point in history, are willing to stand up and say, well, we've got to build a culture, or we're going to build a culture. We have a great culture. And oftentimes when they say that, what they mean is we got to get a ping pong table, or we got to have beer and brats on Friday afternoon. When you work with your clients, how do you help them build a meaningful long-term culture? What should they be thinking about or doing or working on?
I think that the most important thing that the CEOs that I work with do or need to do is provide information to the employees about how the company's doing. And that does not mean we're losing money, you're all going to lose your jobs, we can't make payroll. I mean, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we have a plan to grow. Here are the metrics, and talk to the employees and teach the employees about how they can contribute to the growth. And what does that mean to the employee? First of all, it means security. I'm going to have a job. If we're growing and I'm doing my part, I've got a place to belong to be part of, and so forth. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think in a lot of companies, we don't talk about this very much, but there's a lot of people who are disengaged. And some violently disengaged, yep. and others less disengaged. I think it behooves us to make a list literally and sit down with people one-on-one and say, look, you're coming in late, you're leaving early, you're using up all your sick days. To me, this is a flashing yellow light that you're not engaged in your work. We're trying to grow this company. You're an important part. What do we need to do to get you as part of this team? And then listen. And if they say, I've been working here for 5 years, I never got a raise, never been reviewed, evaluated, appraised. I hear my boss tell me I do a good job, but it doesn't translate into my paycheck. Or if I make a mistake, the boss doesn't talk to me for 3 days. He's mad at me. Or I'd love to be a contributor, but I notice nobody around me is contributing. They're all goofing around and so forth and so on. So I think having these, I want to call them thought-provoking conversations with not turning into an interrogation, but giving people an opportunity to voice their world is going to be really a positive thing. So I think that finding out who's disengaged, finding out what it would take to address that would be very important. I also think, and I know this is going to run counter to what other people may believe, this whole work and remote thing is okay for some industries, and it isn't for others. And so I think that the more people that you can get to come to work, even if it's 1 or 2 days a week, where everybody's there, and this is where, the orchestra, if you're running an orchestra, yes, you can practice in the privacy of your own home or apartment or condo. But if you want to really play well, you all got to be there in front of the conductor. And so that we need more of getting together, playing the music together. And I think that at least initially getting people in the office 1 or 2 days a week would be critical. Having those discussions, hard discussions, might be critical. And if you can't give somebody a raise, tell them why. Yep. It's okay to say, look, I can't give you a raise right now. We can look at this in 3 months. However, what I could do, if you don't mind, is I could probably give you a couple more days off if you want to have a long weekend away. Oh, yeah, that would be nice. Okay, so in lieu of a raise right now, I'm going to give you a couple days off. Just make sure that everything on your desk is covered, and we'll go from there. And somebody might also say, well, the schools are not back in session, so I've got a childcare problem. Okay, I'm the CEO. I don't have young kids. I don't know what that's like. What I need for you to do is come back to me with the plan, and we can talk about it. Because whatever I'm doing for you, I need to do for everybody else that's in the same situation. So those are the kind of things I think that help. It does come back to, we're going to grow the company. You play an important part. Here's your role. And I go back to those 12 questions in the Marcus Buckingham book, First Break All the Rules. Do you have the tools and equipment you need to do your job right every day? Start down the list of the 12 questions to make sure that people have what they need to do their job. And lastly, Rick, I've discovered that many supervisors and many managers are really bad at being a supervisor or a manager. Nobody's taught them how to be a supervisor or a manager. They've just become, and you know this from your background, the best car salesman on the lot becomes the sales manager.
Yep.
He knows nothing about managing people. He just knows how to sell more cars.
Yep.
Right? The best accountant becomes head of accounting. Now that's a disaster in itself. Because accountants don't talk to anybody and so forth. But I think that having an honest assessment about people's supervisory and management skills is really critical, because people will leave. People leave their manager, right? They don't leave the company; they leave their manager. And if you have toxic managers, toxic supervisors, they need to be weeded out. And it's okay to have tough conversations.
Yes.
So that's my couple of thoughts I have on culture.
Well, one of the things you said there that is, I think, one of the most frequently violated when you talked about, do you have the infrastructure, the tools, the information you need to do your job? And particularly in small, medium-sized companies, although I've seen it when I worked for companies as big as McDonnell Douglas, they hired you because you were talented, and then they throw you into a situation with no tools, no structure, no training, no onboarding, none of those things. And then they evaluate your execution. Well, I quickly learned that my execution could never accomplish more than the structure that I was given to go do it.
Right.
And so I think when we talk about building a culture, too often we think, well, it's a great opportunity. We have a great product. We have great service. The market's hot. Go do something. Go write programs. Go sell. Go whatever. And we haven't put any of the stuff in place to allow people who get up in the morning and want to do a good job, allow them to do a good job.
Right. You're right.
And there's almost nobody who speaks for that structure level of the business. So that's one that I'm so glad you said that, because I just so often see people fail, not because they can't do it or don't want to do it. They just don't have the things they need to do it.
Yeah, let me share a quick story with you. I was asked to facilitate a nonprofit board of directors retreat. And so I met some of the members for lunch, and we were kind of talking about it. I was asking a lot of questions. And one of the guys on the board said, and this is going to sound crazy, but it kind of said a lot about the culture. So there was like a lobby of the building, and to get into the lobby, you pressed a buzzer, and then somebody on the inside had to press the buzzer to unlock the door. And on the inside, where the buzzer was to unlock the door, was like 10 feet away from where all the desks were. So like every day, every time somebody came to the door, whoever was there had to get up, walk over, and press the button. And we had a conversation about this. And I thought to myself, if they'd set it up, why did they set it up this way? And the answer I got, kind of, soft voice, don't let anybody hear you, don't repeat this. Yeah, they thought that the lady that was answering, that was closest, was just really lazy, and so they wanted her to get out of her chair and move around. And I thought, and when he said that, I thought to myself, this is not an organization that I'm going to be able to influence. And I passed on the opportunity. Because if they're doing things like that, I mean, really, what kind of culture are you creating and maintaining?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's interesting is it's almost as if it's an adversarial relationship. And one of the things that I think the last few years have made really abundantly clear is the world is so transparent now that even if you want to hide something, you can't completely hide it. And once people see a little bit of it, then they're going to make up a story, and the story is going to be much worse than what the reality is.
Yes, yes.
And so there's no sense trying to hide things. And, you know, as you were talking earlier about some people being disengaged, and I think one of the things we see all the time is the employee takes the job because they need the money. And I understand that. But we don't try to hire people who need the money who are also compelled by our purpose. And, you know, if I can hire two people and they both have the same skills, even if one has a little less, if they are passionate about what we do, then whatever the skills are for today, 2 years from now will be different anyway.
That's right.
So I want that human who gets up in the morning and says, yes, I get to do this. I have so many friends that in their internships or in their summer jobs, they work someplace like Disney. Mm-hmm. And they're now my age and they're going, best job I ever had was working at Disney. Because they believed in, you know, make this the happiest place on earth.
Exactly.
Make every one of those kids happy. And, you know, we see that often in medical practice, or your wife's a teacher with teachers. We see it with engineers who love engineering. We see it with salespeople who love selling. You know, we've got to focus more on the purpose of businesses.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I agree. It's not, and so as you mentioned, I do work with a fair number of privately held businesses. And in some cases, the purpose of the business is to make money, as they say, make money. That's our goal here. But I've twisted their thinking around a little bit. There has to be a higher purpose.
Yeah.
And in one particular case, I've got a guy who has a temp agency. And I just remember the first time I met him, and he's focused on building the business so he can sell it and go into retirement. I get that. I mean, we've all been taught the purpose of a business is to be sold, right? Okay. But I go back to that movie Dave with Kevin Kline.
Yeah.
And, there was Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah.
And he owns a temp agency, right? He moonlights masquerading as the president or imitating the president. And he says it's Monday and everybody works on Monday, meaning he's interested in getting people working on Monday. What does that do? It gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them pride. They're making a contribution. They're part of society. They're not on the sidelines anymore.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'll give you another example. These aerospace companies. It's long work, it's hard work. You're standing on concrete most of the day. It's demanding work. You got to be smart. You have to maybe program the job into a multi-million-dollar machine. Yep. And you know, there's just a lot of moving parts. No pun intended.
Yep.
The smarter aerospace companies have pictures around the facility saying this part's going into that B-1 bomber.
Yep.
This part's going into that 737.
Yep.
This wheel assembly is going on the Airbus.
Yeah.
And so people can feel part of something bigger than just the machine, and the machine going clunk, 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 and out it comes. One company in particular, they were assembling a missile, not the armament part, but the missile, the projectile. And they had pictures up of explosions in Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth. Like, this is what we did. This thing is, and people, they laughed about it, but it gave them a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Hey, we're doing this. We're protecting people. We're killing the bad guys. This is what, and that gives people a sense of mission, getting out of bed in the morning, working hard, doing a quality job on time. So,
amen. And I think, as you talked about, some of the not public companies, and I think this is true with public companies as well, but often the family-owned companies, when the company started, it had some kind of purpose.
Yes.
And it could have been, I started doing landscaping because I love doing landscaping and I love creating beautiful things. But as you hire the 100th person and you're worried about payroll and you're worried about, workman's comp and all these things, sometimes we forget why we started. And, and when we forget why we started, the people forget why they're there. They're no longer there to make beautiful yards or, beautiful outsides of buildings. They're there just for the $22 an hour or whatever it is.
Right, right.
You get that disengagement that you were talking about. So because I get to talk to a lot of small, medium companies, keep telling them, bring back the purpose. That's why the people hired with you to begin with 20 years ago, bring it back today, because it's even more important today. Because one of the things that we've realized is when we talk about culture, your example of, I'm in business to make money. Well, if anybody's read the Simon Sinek Infinite Game, there's people who are finite, which is I'm only in it to make money and get out. You end up with a completely different culture than if you're in business to make a difference in the world and make a lot of money.
Yes, that's right.
And the finite, the short-term player, we use the term mercenary. It's all about mercenaries. And you hire the best engineer, or you hire the best programmer, or you hire the best salesperson, and they're going to stay with you until somebody else offers them more money, or a cooler computer, or something else to work on. That's and right. If you want to run a mercenary company, absolutely go do that. But just recognize it's a mercenary culture. And because the world's transparent, your customer knows you're a mercenary.
Right.
And when you negotiate with them, it's going to be win-lose negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And absolutely you can do that. But if you're an infinite company and you really care about your people and your people care about your purpose, and you're really there to create the greatest value that purpose has to create, now your culture is your current and future employees, your current and future customers, your current and future business partners, the community you live in. Your purpose drives all those people into your culture or out of it, depending on which of the two cultures you create.
Right, that's right. Yeah, I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact, you're right, when you hire your 100th employee, and what are they worried about? They're worried about, am I going to get off early on Friday? When's my next raise? When's the next holiday? As opposed to a broader mission we're gonna be known for the beauty we create in every residential yard we transform. So yeah, that's why people initially join the company. They believe in that the journey is going to do something of significant. I think back to Abraham Lincoln calls up 75,000 volunteers at the start of the Civil War, and a 90-day enlistment, I think it was.
Yeah, it was.
And what was that all about? Hey, we're gonna preserve the Union.
Yep.
And that's why people signed up.
Yep.
Fought and died.
Yep.
So.
And I think purpose is one of those things that creates great value for all the people. And so, as you think about what's going on in our world today, what advice first do you have for leaders? What should they be thinking about in this hopefully post-pandemic world? And then the second question is going to be for those maybe young people who are starting their careers, and how do they pick the right place or the right leaders or the right purposes? So what should both of those groups be thinking about at this point in history?
Well, I think the leaders need to focus on, at this point, most of my clients have gray hair, have maybe, I would say, 10 to 15 years left to be part of their companies. And so they're thinking about, next generation or selling or whatever. I would be, and I've done a fair amount of this, is making sure that there's bench strength below the leadership level in case something happens. And I'll give you a very sad example. I think you actually met this individual at one of the workshops, but one of the guys that was in one of the manufacturing groups, he had a partner, a younger partner. He knew he was getting up there in the years, but he's younger than I am. He passed away from COVID in September. I mean, it just happened overnight, pretty much. And so I think that leaders need to be aware that we're all frail, and the real numbers are that at some point something's going to happen to us, and we may be out for a short period of time or a long period of time, or we may be gone forever. So having strong bench strength is critical, and the people on the bench need to have the same cultural attributes that the leaders do, or the CEO does. So that's the first thing. The other thing is for leaders, nobody I know, including myself, had global pandemic on their SWOT analysis at the end of 2019. So things are going to happen like this.
Yes.
Right? Let me give you another example. No one thought Donald Trump would be elected president. I didn't get elected president, and he got elected president. And, good for him. But one of the things, again, nobody had on their SWOT analysis in the fall of 2016 was raising tariffs from China. And a number of my clients have been impacted by the increase in the tariffs. One guy, Dan was his name, he was importing something from China, and then he was trying to make the shift after the tariffs went into place to Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia. But he'd get a phone call, he got a phone call in one of our meetings, and he said, okay, let's set up the wire transfer. And he hangs up the phone and said, sorry, don't mean to have a phone call in the middle of our meetings, but the stuff arrived down at the Long Beach Harbor and we got to pay a $20,000 tariff. I mean, that's the kind of thing that this kind of stuff happens. So I'm not saying expect the unexpected. I am saying unexpected stuff will happen. Be ready. Just be ready. So that's for the leaders. For younger people, I would say to find the right company, you need to have a network. And most young people don't have a network. What I've discovered about younger people is they have a network from college. Some people go into family businesses. Some people go to work for big companies. Some people just do whatever they're doing, and they got a degree, but they're not using it. And then there's other people that maybe go on to a business school or professional schools, et cetera, et cetera. But if I had to do it over again, now that I look back, I didn't have a network.
Yeah.
I had no network. It was like, kids I went to high school with. I was basically at a commuter college. I knew my neighbors, but I didn't have a network. So and you got to be careful too. There was a guy that was working with me at Swedenlow. He got laid off, and it was kind of sad. We shut the division down. He got let go, and he called me up one day after he'd been laid off, and he said, "Can we meet for lunch?" And I said, "Sure." So I meet him for lunch, and I said, "I haven't heard from you in 3 or 4 months. What have you been doing?" He said, "I'm trying to get a job as a pharmaceutical sales rep." And I said, "Oh, really? How'd you hear about that?" "Oh, one of my friends said it paid really well." Okay, he was like a bookkeeper. He, you know, I'm not saying he was a bad guy. He was not a bad guy, but he certainly wasn't a pharmaceutical sales reps. All the ones that I've ever seen, bust in the doors at the medical office. They work quick and they're professional and they know the drugs and and all they're trying to do is get an appointment, and then they're out of there, right? Yeah. This guy ended up teaching junior high, which is probably a good job for him. But I told him, I don't know why you're chasing your tail. You're never, you don't have a degree in any kind of industry or anything else. Well, my friend said it paid really well. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of jobs that pay really well. Professional baseball player, NFL player, right? Head coach of a college football team. They all pay pretty well. That doesn't mean we're qualified. So, so people need a network to keep them honest. Not just to help them and say, yeah, but they need a network for people to say, look.
Oh, I love that.
I know you.
Great insight.
Yeah, I know you. You're not a pharmaceutical sales rep. And you ought to get a baseball bat and take it to the idiot that told you that you could do it. So anyway, that's what I would say. And I know that there's glassdoor.com and there's all the comments about this is a good employer and it's better to hear it from somebody who actually works there.
Yeah.
And so I just think that most kids need a network and they don't have it. Male, female. I know that the pandemic has really hurt in-person meetings. People could join, and I know that I'm dating myself, the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, their church, some kind of professional organization. If they want, for example, if I wanted to get into marketing, I would join the American Marketing Association, find a local chapter, that kind of thing. But that's what I'd do if I was a young person. And the other thing I would say is it's okay to work for a privately held company. Understand it's probably going to get sold at some point. Just be aware of that. Understand that your boss today may not be your boss tomorrow. And if you join a family business and as in The Godfather, you're not part of the family, you're not going to become an owner.
Yep.
Just how it is.
Yep. So, yeah, that's really interesting, Ken. And I love the network suggestion for accountability. And one of the things that I discovered during the pandemic that I'm really thrilled I discovered is a thing called Lunch Club.
Oh.
I still can't figure it out because they don't charge you anything, but you can sign up for Lunch Club and you can meet people they have a version of Zoom. It's not Zoom, but from all over the world. And you can limit whether you want them from your area or global or whatever. Fascinating people. And you can have, I don't know, 3 or 4 meetings a week if you want to. And I'd never thought about that. But if I were a young person, either just graduating or, I'd be on Lunch Club 4 days a week.
Yes. Yes.
I've just met some of the most fascinating people, and I haven't chosen them. You get to choose your profile and all that. I didn't choose them because I wanted to sell them anything. I wanted to meet interesting people. But it's turned out it's been very good for business too, even though that wasn't what I set out to do with it. And the other thing I loved about for the leaders, I get kind of my hot button is during the pandemic when people talked about pivoting. You know, being an ex-basketball player, pivoting is you plant your foot and you stay in one place and spin around. And that's also true in engineering. When you look at irrigation systems, you put the water in the center and the thing spins around in a circle. Well, the last thing a business wants to do is plant its foot and spin around because the rest of the world is going someplace. But when you analyze what that people were saying, back to our conversation about kind of the mercenary business versus the purpose business, purpose-driven businesses don't pivot. They know where they're going. They may change how they're getting there or change the cadence or, but they know where they're going. There's no pivoting. I get it. The mercenary business, I was here to make money, but the bubble burst. So now I got to find a new bubble to take advantage of. So I get the fact they pivot. But when you look at this century, we started the century with the dot bomb, followed by 9/11, followed by the Great Recession, followed by Trump, followed by the pandemic. And when you do the math, it's someplace between 1 out of every 2 years or 1 out of every 3 years is some kind of black swan. And so if you're a leader, even an employee, and you are not thinking about the fact there are going to be black swan events, I think you're kidding yourself, because there's going to be more. And they may not be pandemics, and they may not be political, but there'll be something. And so you just better have a business model that says, and again, that's why, to me, purpose is so important. Because if my purpose is really about making the world better, whatever those tragedies or crazy things are, it doesn't change my commitment to my purpose.
Right.
So,
so let me just share with you. I mentioned when we spoke about going to the George W. Bush Presidential Library, and I always accused Bush of of having a philosophy or a purpose, as it were, in his handling of the country after 9/11. So I knew he had one. I knew he had a purpose, but he was never clear. Maybe he wasn't a good communicator. He could have been better, whatever. But anyway, so we go to the presidential library there, and he has on one of the exhibits, the Bush, the Bush philosophy, the Bush principles, whatever it was called, and they were clearly enunciated there, short, sweet. Even as my granddaughter, who was in the 4th grade at the time, could see what they were. And I thought to myself, if he'd just been more articulate about what these things were, more people would have understood what he was trying to do.
Yeah. And yes. And that's, we don't train our leaders to do that intentionally. Some of them learn it and are marvelous. And we don't share it with our, some companies, Gore Industries is one that's really good at their employees find all the next employees.
Yeah.
And, because they love what they're doing and they love where they're doing it. And they want to bring other people in that are going to make the place even better.
Exactly.
And so I always am surprised we don't think about that very intentionally. It's accidental most of the time. Well, Ken, this has been great. Is there any last words of advice or thoughts you have, for people trying to balance the revenue and the culture thing?
Well, I would say if you're struggling with profitability, that's like a fire in the kitchen. You got to be profitable first. and you may have to make some very tough decisions, but you've got to take care of that issue first. And if you explain to people, we're not making money, it has nothing to do with how much salary I'm taking out of here, because I'm not taking any salary out of here. We're just not efficient, and our sales and marketing efforts are not getting the result we want. So we're going to have to do some things so that we become a profitable business. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and maybe at the same time, we've got to build a culture of profitable revenue. What does that mean for you? And then as the leader, I need to explain it to people. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's how you make a contribution. And we all need to contribute. I'm not saying take a pay cut, reduce the number of holidays, reduce your vacation. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm just simply saying is, if we've got salespeople who are out on the street every day, 7 days a week, making sales calls, we've got to support them. So when they call in on a Sunday afternoon and say, I'm standing in front of a customer, he's having some really tough times, we need to be able to reply. We can't let them get the voicemail message, yeah, call me back at 9 a.m. on Monday.
Yes.
Right? So
yeah.
We've got to be supportive of revenue growth. What does that mean? Being available. So that's it. So, and then you build a culture. You build a culture of success.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you used the term, I loved it earlier, accountability, and that example you gave is, if the salesperson's out doing their thing, the rest of the organization needs to be accountable as much as the salesperson wants. That's right.
That's right. Because the salesperson cannot do it all.
No.
That's why everybody in the back has a job to take care of the salespeople. Yes, salespeople are loud. They cut corners. They're horrible with paperwork. They like the kill, but they don't like to clean it up and make it pretty. That's why we all have jobs.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's why we have jobs. Because we don't want to go out there and become the salesperson. By the way, I have companies that regularly tell all the employees, and it's actually a good philosophy. Yes, the salespeople make a salary and they make a bonus based upon what they sell. Their bonus and salary is larger than yours. Why is that? They have a more difficult job. Any one of you that wants to try sales, please come to me and we'll put you through the training program. But I don't want to hear any complaints that those guys are making more money simply because they have a harder job. And if you would try out sales, you'd understand that.
Interesting. I haven't heard that, but I like that. I like that. Well, Ken, thank you very much. It's been fun. We don't get to do this often enough. And I really appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure. I was delighted to participate, Rick. And you're right, we don't do it often enough.
So for everybody else, thank you for joining us today. And we hope to see you again for the next Living a Revenue Culture podcast.